Phil.
Are you listening? Damn. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, we're live with another brand new episode of The Critics. Thank you for joining us. And I want to start out by saying this is an interactive dialogue with us about how to potentially run your business in a better way. So this is all about tips, tricks, insights, and perspectives on how, as a leader, you can be more effective. Today's topic is about employees. Your employees want to do more for you, but do you know how and where they have that capacity to do more for you? It is an interactive conversation. You'll be able to see on the right-hand side, you should see comments. If you have questions, want clarification about some of the nuggets of wisdom that are dropped here from my esteemed panel, feel free to ask. I would love to ask our panel of them so they can give you more detail. But my name is Vinay Raman. I am the CEO of Carmo, and we decode human and organizational behavior through data. So we show these graphs that help people understand, specifically leaders, what's happening in the organizations. But today I've got three special guests on my panel who are going to help give you more perspective on what those employees can and want to do for you. In no particular order, I'm going to start first with Mark Stewart. Mark, hey, how you doing today?
I'm doing awesome. I love the intro. I needed to have that just wake me up in the morning. I think I'm just going to record that as my wake up call.
Not a problem, Mark. I'll send that to you in email just after the call here, so you have that.
Sounds good.
Next, Madelyn Dunlap. Sorry, Madelyn. How are you doing today?
Wonderful. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Looking forward to some of your perspectives on what we're going to be talking about. And last but not least at all, Rob, how are you? How are you doing today?
I'm great, but you put the pressure on. I'm responsible for dropping nuggets, so we got to look out for these nugget droppings happening. So yes, no, I'm doing great, and I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, thank you all for joining, and anybody in the audience, I'd love to hear where you're connecting in from. Just tell me what part of the country, if you're outside the United States, where are you connecting from? Just share with us. I'd love to get a sense of where our audience is connecting in from. I want to start first with that title as kind of the way to start the conversation. Rob, I'll start with you. This idea, your employees want to do more for you. Do you want to know how? That's the title of our conversation. What came to mind when we suggested that topic? You've been in business for a number of years. You've run a number of companies in an operations role. What came to mind? What experiences do you have around that?
Well, the first thing that came to mind, honestly, was wouldn't it be great if we had a lot of players like that who came and said this to us, right? That was my first response. So I wish I had more experiences, because you don't always have a lot of people who come to you and say, I want to do more. I want to contribute more. So when that happens, it's a good day, right? Number one. Number two, I guess the first thing I thought of was thinking about really taking a step back when a person asked that and trying to really think about how they're currently fulfilling and really assessing their current role before adding on more tasks, but then ultimately how we can assess what they bring to the table currently, and by adding new, could this be something if handled incorrectly, I believe could be detrimental. So while on the face of it, it seems like a great thing, if handled badly, it could really be detrimental. So that was one of the approaches that I would like to discuss at some point here.
Yeah, fair enough. Jury connecting in from Germany. Hey, Jury, good to see you again. Ryan Ray from Raleigh, Carl from Omaha, Catherine from Raleigh as well, and Todd Sawyer from Boise. thank you all for checking in. I would love to hear from you all from the title alone. What sort of thoughts came to mind for you when you heard the title that drew you to take some time to join our episode? Please, I'd love to see that in the comments. Madelyn, I'll go to you next. The title, what came to mind?
I think the first thing that came to mind was the study that Gallup releases about employee engagement. And it's a study that year over year surprises me, that the majority or just a huge chunk of our workforce is not engaged. And even though that is, I think it can be disheartening. I've talked to CEOs who feel disheartened by that. I think the other side of it is that there is a lot of opportunity. I don't think employees have to be disengaged, even disengaged employees in your organization today. I don't think they have to remain disengaged. I think there are strategies that can be put in place, and not just think, I've seen strategies put in place that can increase engagement across the board. So while the title, I think some CEOs may look at it and say, well, yeah, but what do I have to do to get them, what's the catch? I think that is the reality, that in every organization, there is room for your employees to be more engaged, to be delivering greater levels of service to your customers, and also to feel more connected to your organization, to have better results overall.
Mark, I'll toss it over to you. What were your first sentiments when you saw it, or if you don't want to comment on what Madelyn or Rob said?
I love what both of them said. I think what got me excited is, I spent thousands of hours with startup companies and Fortune 500 companies, and it's basically mostly the same story across the board. Managers are so busy, they only evaluate people by maybe 1 to 3 things. And the reality is there's so much more that employees are asking now that you need to be aware of a lot of different things. So I think as we go through this, it'll be interesting to kind of peek out. It's about the details. It's not about, the really big number I care about, it's all the little tiny things that gives me an indication about why is this employee not engaged and what can I do about it to help them. So usually it's different for every individual. So that's why I'm excited to kind of go through some of these examples and tell some real stories behind them. So it's going to be fun.
Yeah. So we've got Carol Compton from Los Angeles joining in. Brian Scott from Durham. Brian, hey buddy, nice to see you again. Ryan says, yes, Madelyn, I study this report and refer to it daily. And he goes on to say, only 1/3 of employees feel they're thriving in the workplace. I think this kind of is touching what you all are saying. So I'm going to talk a little bit from personal experience. Having led employees before, my desire as a leader is to push them kind of to that next level of performance and productivity and profitability for the company. But I also don't want to push them out the door. And that's something that has always been kind of threshold. I feel like I think I know what that level is, and I dial it back 3 steps just to make sure I don't push them out. Rob, is that kind of the way you've looked at things as well? I mean, kind of talking to this, 33% of employees feel like they actually are thriving in the workplace based on what Ryan put in the comments there.
I think so. I think, whenever I can tell you the programs that we run as part of our company, Evolve YT, is that we have a program that's pretty comprehensive. And my first thought when we started doing it is we were initially going to get a lot of pushback, right? Because we're basically taking over these people, the mid-level managers, and taking over their position and really kind of commandeering them, so to speak, as we take over their program. And I can tell you, everyone, I really anticipated a lot of pushback from doing this. And I have been blown away by the response. It's the fact that the hunger for knowledge and their thirst for improvement across the board has been, I don't have a single issue yet with where we have a participating manager who does not want to be participating. So one of the first things we thought of as we were going to market, are we going to deal with pushback from the actual managers themselves? And I'm really, really thrilled to say that we have yet to encounter that at all. So I think so the fact that you tell me 33% of the workforce is engaged, I wouldn't dispute that.
So Catherine James says, please comment on intrinsic versus extrinsic behaviors and psychological safety. It seems that a lot of engagement strategies that focus on extrinsic rewards can burn out intrinsic rewards. Mark, Madelyn, have any thoughts on that, on those topics, or Rob? Well, I'll hazard. Well, go ahead, Mark.
No, I was going to turn that over to Madelyn on that question.
That's not like a Madelyn question. Way to put her on the spot, Mark. Nice job.
Yeah, really.
No, but I was making a joke, because I was like, well, I'm drawing blank on that one.
Well, I
might go ahead.
Yeah, I might comment on that, right? And where I see in terms of defining that intrinsic versus extrinsic. Intrinsic is something that they feel themselves. Extrinsic is something outside of them, right? And I feel like there's a lot more emphasis in today. A lot of people kind of label millennials as experience-based. Well, experience is intrinsic value, because intrinsic value is what creates that experience. So I think there's a good question there, Catherine, about this idea of burning out rewards, because extrinsic, you can push somebody, but if they don't have the desire to do it, they won't follow through with it. I'll give you a quick example with my kids. If I tell them to clean the room, any one of the three of them, three different personalities, I tell them, hey, clean your room. One of them will do it because she is the one who likes to dot the I's and cross the T's and do whatever her parents tell her to do. The other two, the boys, will not. As a matter of fact, they may have just, it goes in one ear and comes out the other one as soon as I say it. But as soon as I throw ice cream on the table and saying, hey, you know what, if you guys clean up the room, we'll go out to ice cream afterwards. All of a sudden, there's this intrinsic desire to get that ice cream. And all of a sudden, whatever I need to do to get that done becomes interesting for them. And it amazes me how much ice cream actually works. And I wonder if that touches on what you're asking there, Catherine, about this idea of, I think extrinsic rewards are not something that someone will opt into. I think intrinsic rewards is where it really needs to start from. It can be extrinsically motivated or compensated. Any thoughts from you?
Well, I feel like I have to say something because Mark kind of put me on the spot. But
you'll pay me back through the rest.
Right. We'll just wait for the next comment. And
you're in her crosshairs, Mark.
I think that another point that comes to mind, Catherine, is that benefits, no matter how generous they are not going to compensate for a culture of work that's burning people out. That you really have to take a look, not just at, well, this is, we're doing unlimited PTO, and these are all great benefits that employees value. Having opportunities for community service or continuing education, medical, dental, all these great things that are being thrown out there to the workforce. It doesn't compensate for a workplace that is burning you out. You'll still burn people out.
That's really interesting.
Madelyn's exactly right. And I think what's hard for me too is when I notice most companies, when I see their rewards program, it's one size fit all. It's, hey, I'm doing this for everybody. And it really only helps out maybe 10% of your workforce are excited about it. The rest don't care. And so that makes it really hard on us, is because there's not just one way to take care of your company. It's almost has to be individual rewards for each person. But I don't know if that helps or hurts. But that seems to be, I think, a big reason why most people are burnt out is the rewards you think you're giving people is not what they're excited about.
If
I just put a post out a little earlier today. Sorry, go ahead, Rob.
Just to piggyback on both what Madelyn and Mark said, and Vinay, what you said initially is when you were reading, you were quoting something that was based on a report of surveyed millennials. Mark, you talked about one size fits all. If you're not thinking of your workforce generationally, then you're really not even thinking about the different ways to interface with your team members. I can tell you that the way that I interface on my team alone, I have a small team. I know just my team alone. I have a boomer, 2 Xers, 5 millennials, and a bunch of Zs. So I can tell you that the way that I interface with every one of those as group is very, very, very different. So incentivization and prioritization, things like that are very, very different by generation. And we could do a whole other 12-hour podcast on generations, but just to say that, just another factor to be thinking when you're thinking intrinsically and extrinsically.
I just put a post out this morning. Something I've firmly believed in is that I can pay people for their minds, but if I get their hearts, I win. And I think that's sort of a common thread that I'm hearing amongst what everyone's saying, right? I mean, changing how you respond based on the generation, right? They've got different needs, they've got different wants, they've got different desires. They're just in different stages of life, right? So one size fits all does not work anymore. It is almost a custom and tailored solution. I think that sounds a lot more difficult than it actually is, because once you start to learn the style of each one of these people, you can truly unleash the superhero that lies within for each one of them, right? Superman's got his kryptonite, but Aquaman has got to be in water all the time, right? If we use superheroes like that, right?
And I think a lot of companies externally have gotten it. They definitely think more in the ways of generational marketing and those ideas, but they're not. From when I see a lot of companies I work with, don't take a lot of that inward and think about it with their workforce. They're definitely thinking that way from a customer retention perspective and a marketing perspective. But obviously, to turn that inward, the more that you understand generationally, the more I think you can help with both retention and with retention, really.
So there's a comment here that Jury put out. It said it would be interesting to look at the corporate culture and the size. Normally at smaller companies, it is easier to increase engagement. And for large organizations, it is a bit more challenging, especially if the culture is not set for engagement. Comments, thoughts on that?
Unfortunately, I haven't seen that. So small companies can be just as messed up as large companies, unfortunately. And it all comes down to the person, the people. And so I've worked with small companies that don't have great communication. The managers don't talk to their people, and their people are unsatisfied. And I've been at Fortune 500 companies that have the same problems. So I think it's really individual based, like across the board. Not every large company is great to work with, and not every small company is great to work with, unfortunately. So, but I see where you're coming from. I think that's a tendency, but just what I've seen across the board, unfortunately, everyone is making this mistake and not taking care of their people in some way, in some fashion.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, one of our foundations of how we work with businesses is that there are stages of growth, and strategies that work in one stage are not going to work in another. I also have young kids, and I always liken it to that they go through different stages. They need different things. And I think if you're trying to apply a small business strategy to your large business, you're probably not being successful. So I don't think size is unimportant, but I don't necessarily know that one is easier than the other, except for in mass. I think the other thing with a large business, sometimes we throw up our hands and say, well, this is this gigantic thing. How do we change it? Well, it's kind of that saying, right? Like, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Each of that organization is broken up into smaller divisions and departments. And in some ways, they're little units of their own. So if you can incite change in those smaller groups, I think the worst thing you can do is throw up your hands and say, well, it's too big to move. There's always footholds.
So I want to transition a little bit here, because I will tell you, growing up, I may have been one of the only kids that loved physics growing up. But back when I was in school, they didn't have whiteboards back then. It was still chalkboards. We just moved from sticks on the ground with dirt. But I loved physics, especially not when we were writing the equations on the board, but I was actually getting to crash those billiard balls and everything else together. When I saw the practical application of it, the light bulb would go off in my head. And that usually took some time for that to occur. But usually in those lab practical applications, I feel like the picture became a lot clearer. And I'm seeing lots of really good comments here. What I'd like to do is I'd like to bring up some of the graphs. And the three of you have seen some of these already. And what these graphs do is, as a company, what we do is we take data and we start to build these behavioral profiles for individuals within a company. So all the companies, individuals in a company. I want to bring up a couple of graphs here. And I'd love to see what you all perceive in terms of the excess capacity that those employees may have, and how you might approach it as a leader is in drawing that out. Is that fair?
Sounds great.
Let me share my screen here, and we should be hot in a second here. All right, you all can see my screen?
Got it.
Yep.
All right, so I'm gonna bring up the first graph here, and let me introduce you to what you're looking at. So we've changed out some names. This is an organization that's got a couple of different locations. We're looking at their Dallas branch. It's not actually Calvin. And in this particular role, so we're looking at one role at a time so we can do apples to apples comparisons. We've pulled in a bunch of data and said that the average person in that role is doing on average, on a scale of 0 to 100, they've got a 52, right smack dab in the middle. Calvin has got a 51. And the way we come up with that 51 is we take all this data from all the different performances of those employees on a regular basis, and we kind of rack and stack them against each other to see how they're performing. So this 51 comprises of how they're in this, and really the KPIs don't matter. The KPIs replace depending on whatever industry you go to. In this industry, driver behavior, how they drive their vehicles, they speed a lot, they brake hard, that matters. And they've got a 40 out of 100 on that one individual dimension. Their efficiency as a technician in that role, how they feel as an employee in their employment experience, their NPS or Net Promoter Score, what is their skills mastery? It's a self-assessment of their mastery, and their ability to refer jobs back to the home office by doing sales. These are the different dimensions. Red is a lower performer, yellow is a mid-level performer, and green is a higher, more effective performer. Let me show you this graph, and now I'd love to open it up for some thoughts, perspectives from you. So if you look at this graph here, this blue area tells you how Calvin is behaving. That blue area is Calvin. This darker gray area in the back is the average. So you can see that Calvin does better in this area than the average. The best case scenario is this thing is completely blue. So you can see in driver behavior, efficiency, there are some areas that are less effective compared to the average, and there's more effectiveness left on the table. I want to start right there. Just by looking at this graph, Madelyn, Robert, Mark, any initial thoughts or sentiments about Calvin? You probably never meet this person, but what do you see as a leader, and what do you see as potential opportunity here?
Well, I'll start first and just say, first of all, I love priority alignment. So this is something Vinay and I have discussed quite a bit, and that we use, and I think is something that is so simple and basic, but so powerful. And the companies that we have run it with, to be able to see what they've been able to do just through alignment of priorities through teams has been really phenomenal. That's number one. So number two, what I would say, whenever I see yellow, I see opportunity. I see opportunity, right? So you have someone who is obviously performing well, but there's a lot of opportunity to work with and see improvement. So to me, yellow is probably my favorite color, because I love a challenge, and I love the fact that I have someone who's already probably pretty engaged here, but at the same time, I see a lot of opportunities and a lot of intentional activities that can be developed, and coachable activities.
So a question I often ask people when I show graphs like this, and I'll show you some examples of other employees and how they behave, how they appear differently, right? We can see that there's a tendency for Calvin in this case. He's got a lot of strength here in this tech referral, that's inside sales space. I always ask, and this is a question I'd like to ask those who are watching, the audience who's watching in. I always like to think in terms of just help me classify, or see how you classify it. Is this an A-level employee, really high performer, or B or C or a D? I'd love to hear in the comments, A, B, C, or D, A being a highest level performer. What do you think? Madelyn, Mark, Rob says, I love the yellow because we're seeing all these areas where there's just a lot of white space. There's room for improvement. There's opportunity there. Yeah. Is that something that we can get an employee to do? And how do you have that conversation to maybe draw that opportunity forward? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to mind is if you were just to look at the score overall and you didn't have this level of detail, you would say Calvin's average. Maybe that's good enough. But when I look at this, I see tech referring is just off the charts. And my initial thought would be, do we have Calvin in the right position?
Great seat.
Because he's doing okay in the other areas, and maybe this is where he likes to be. But of all these details, tech referring, that's sales, that's business development. He's also not very efficient. Maybe he likes to talk to people. That I always like to hear the solutions coming from, and I probably wouldn't go in and say we should move you to sales, but just that would be in the back of my mind where I might be guiding or seeing if there's interest there.
I want to tie that back to maybe what a little bit of Catherine asked about regarding the intrinsic versus extrinsic. I mean, I will tell you for myself, I tend to be good at the things that I love doing. Yeah. To your point, Madelyn, if he's so good at this inside sales and this tech referring, and he's kind of off the charts, he's got a 95 out of 100. He's a high performer there. I got to imagine there's a lot of intrinsic motivation for that individual already. That's just already there and present. And there's an opportunity to seize. And that's maybe where we can use some of those extrinsic motivators to say, hey, can I start to shift you over? Mark, you work in the sales, you've coached sales teams. Is that what you're seeing as well here?
Yeah, I think, Rob, Madelyn, you're absolutely right. What I do when I help out managers, I think a lot of managers, all of a sudden when they get data, like they get, like our Field Graphs platform, now all of a sudden they're judging people on 1,000 things. It almost becomes too much. So what I really love about this is the number one thing. One of my best friends told me a long time ago, he goes, you dig for gold, you don't dig for dirt. So you don't go through here and immediately go after a younger person. We'll put it that way. Some people don't like to put labels on them, but a younger person. And you don't go straight to their efficiency. You go straight for, like what Madelyn said, this is what you're doing right, and you're amazing, and you're wonderful. And then you kind of transition it to say, okay, how can I make this even better? And usually in the home service industry, what this kind of means is they might be talking too much, but they might have routes that are all over the place. And so if this person is getting a lot of tech referrals, what we recommend is say, okay, here's the list of everyone that gave you a referral online, and I'm going to mark it on your mobile app. And I want you to knock on the door and ask the person if they know any neighbors that could use our help. You're not selling, you're helping. So if you go to the next door neighbor and end up selling that person or helping more people, now all of a sudden your routes are a lot tighter. So your efficiency is going to skyrocket because you'll have closer people in proximity. So I would use that strength to help out the piece where they're struggling.
And if I could, please. to pivot off what Madelyn said. Madelyn said, you saw I almost jumped out of my seat where it was what we call in EOS language is, right person, right seat. Where is Calvin sitting and should be sitting somewhere else? That's something I definitely was going to touch on. But I think in a situation like with Calvin, the first thing I would probably want to do is, ask him some questions. Yeah. There's a lot of power in questions. Like Calvin, in our jargon, we call it 10-5-3. Calvin, where do you see yourself in 10 years? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you see yourself in 3 years, both personally and professionally? Because without having the background on Calvin, I have no idea if he's in a seat that he is stuck in or if a seat he thinks he belongs in. But as Madelyn said, this could be a situation where Calvin could be an average performer in this seat, but could be a top performer in another.
So I want to kind of touch on a couple of comments. I mean, Jury has made this. I think there's been a thread between Ryan and Jury around this idea of culture, and I think this is a little bit of what Catherine is touching on as well, is right, trying to understand sort of these motivations. I'd love to go to each one of you. Being able to see this level of detail on someone, and as part of anybody who's asking questions here, we'll be more than happy to do a free analysis like this for you, so you can see it for your own organization. Feel free to message in the comments, and I'll get you connected with my team so you can get an assessment just like this for yourself. But what I'd like you to do, Mark, Rob, and Madelyn, is as a leader, how do you use information like this to shift that conversation? Because Rob, you said ask more questions first. What question would you ask Mark to find out how we draw that opportunity?
without putting me on the spot now, but I think I kind of answered that previously, which is I like to start really at the highest level and really find out what makes Calvin tick. Meaning, without having background, assuming that Calvin went to school for this position and this is what he thinks he should be doing, I want to try to have an understanding of what Calvin's passions are, what Calvin's what Calvin is, what gets Calvin out of bed in the morning? Now, is his blue outlier? Is that something that he just comes naturally to him, or is he striving to improve in that area? And so for me, I go back to the actual question of trying to understand where he wants to be, both personally and professionally, in that timeline, so I can have an understanding of who he wants to be and how he plans to get there. Also, I would like to try to run a process that we call like a skills assessment, and really pivot off of this data and produce some more self-generated data, and really kind of take a look at what his current skills are, and how I would rank him in his current role. Is he performing to 80% of all those, at 80% or better in all of the roles that I want him to do in that particular seat? I'm going to start there first and take a look and see from there what else Calvin can do to add to. Remember, the title of the podcast is "My Employees Want to Do More." What next, right? Is that the gist of what we're talking about here? So exactly. What I want to do is I want to be able to assess how he's performing in his current position before I even take a look and see what he can be doing next.
I'd like to ask the audience, when you all see this might be the first time you've seen something like this and presented in this format. Did this give you the capability of quickly understanding who Calvin was? And did it give you a sense of how you would talk differently to Calvin? I'm kind of curious. Yes or no, it'd be a great answer. I'd love to hear what you all think. Madelyn and Mark, I want to switch to somebody else. So we just show them what other people can look like. Here's somebody else, Eric. So average company score for that role is a 52. Eric is a 61. His driver behavior, the way in this particular industry, again, the KPIs that matter around how they handle that vehicle or that truck that they happen to drive around to provide their services. He's got an 83 on his driver behavior. You can see he's an outlier here. His efficiency as a technician, as a service person, is good. And you can see it starts to change here. His net promoter score, his customer service rating, is the lower of all those values. Madelyn, Mark, what sentiment comes to mind as a leader, and talk to me about realizing that opportunity, getting Eric to do more?
Yeah, I mean, a solid player, right? Meeting expectations in areas, exceeding expectations in areas. I immediately picture this, they're very organized, efficient, safe, they like their job. Their net promoter score is probably low because they're like, they're not a lot of chit chat. They've got other places to be. I think this is a great baseline. And again, I was trying to think back, what kind of questions would you ask? And I would hope that this wasn't the first time I was having a conversation with Eric and that I know these things about them, about, where they want to go and what their passions are. And that this just puts data to, how we together plan for growth, whether that's in that role that they're enjoying, or it's saying, are there other places in the organization that they would thrive?
I like the fact that it seems like you had a felt sense of who this person is without even meeting them. It's almost like you've got, again, I'll touch on that intrinsic. I mean, you've got an intrinsic sense of who they are, right, through looking at this. Mark, you were about to say something. I cut you off.
No, it was so good. So I have a little bit of advantage because I talk to a lot of your customers, or my customers. So to prepare for this, I always ask, my customers what they like most about seeing this kind of report, and what they all said, it's the subtle things that are the most important. And so what I would notice here, like in an example, is their NPS score went down slightly. And so now it kind of gives me an opportunity to go, why did that go down slightly? And then just give me an opportunity to just say, hey, how's your life? How are you doing? And when I ask that question, you got to be prepared for the answer, which is, it's not a passing thing. I see you in the hallway and I'm just going to say, hey, how are you doing as I'm walking on. But yeah, real conversation. How are you doing? And what's going on in your life? All of a sudden you'll see all kinds of crazy things just from that little tiny change. All of a sudden they're saying, oh, I'm looking at leaving the company. The competition's going to pay me more. Now, all of a sudden you have no clue, but that little tiny indication helped you have a conversation that now it doesn't become a big issue. All of a sudden it's something I can fix because we can have a conversation about it. But if it's gone on too long and I've never talked to you, all of a sudden they're leaving and you think it's their fault, not necessarily the leadership's fault.
Ryan, Catherine Jane says, love that. Catherine, I think I lost a little bit of the bubble on to which you commented, love that, but thank you. Ryan says 10-5-3 personally and professionally vision. I think Rob, he liked that idea, and Ryan continues on to say yes. So what I love about these graphs here is that you truly can see some of the emotion in the role. I think part of what you're saying, Mark, and Madelyn as well, right? I mean, if we talk about this person, Eric here, I can see that same person, Madelyn, someone who's quiet, kind of just organized, gets their job done. And that net promoter score and the fact that they don't get a lot of tech referrals might be because they're just more of an introverted type personality. They don't say a lot. And sometimes maybe all they need is someone to stop and say, hey, look, here's 3 lines on how you ask for a good referral, or here's how you ask for an inside sale. Here's 3 lines. And they said, oh, I didn't know it was that easy. They just didn't know to ask. And all of a sudden, the flower blooms at that point in time because it was just that easy. They just didn't have that personalized coaching. Is that a fair statement to you all?
It is. It is. And so Mark, and so if I can address Mark real quickly. So I love what you said, but at the same time, I just want to challenge it a little bit. I love what you said. Sometimes when people get a report, they think this is the report. It becomes biblical, right? They can know everything about their business from this one report, right? But that I do agree with you on. But I do think that just too infrequently that I've seen, as far as particularly within the pest management industry, is that too few managers rely on data to create intentional activities. And so to a report like this is how you also summed up, was just by taking a look at this report, by adding 2 or 3 very simple lines into Eric's mindset or psyche, whatever it is, you can make some really drastic impact. So to me, it's using data to create intentional activities or to have key strategic but simple conversations.
No, I love it. I think more or less what I was trying to say is it's kind of like the pendulum. When you have no data, all of a sudden you switch softwares and you have a lot of data. I walked into companies that they have a board of like 100 different things they measure on an individual. So like that's kind of what I meant was, listen, don't let the pendulum swing too far, but try to stay focused. But you're absolutely right.
Sure.
So I'd love to ask Ryan, Jury, and Catherine. I think the word culture, floating around culture, has been part of the thread of some of what you all have been seeing or saying or commenting on. Do you all see a pathway forward in using something like this to be able to create that culture, whether it be large, medium, or small companies, regardless of sort of age, demographic, or generation? I'd be kind of curious as to what your thoughts are. Let's go look at one more. I think we might have enough time to do that. Slightly different personality here. Jairus, average score is 52. Overall is 55 for Jairus. We can see that the net promoter score is a 5. That's our first red. In terms of effectiveness, very low effectiveness there. Do you start screaming in your mind, this person has got to go? Is this, hey, I need to lean in? What comes to mind? Madelyn, I'll pick on you. What comes to mind for you?
Well, I think I might have used my persona too early, because now I'm thinking, this guy is the picture of efficiency, like very focused on safety, not talking to anyone. But the other thing that comes to mind is he has a similar score, or really all of them have fairly similar scores across the three, and how if you take this approach of trying to increase overall effectiveness by introducing one solution, you're going to miss so much opportunity, right? I mean, whereas the guy before, it's give him 3 questions to ask. That may not be enough for Jairus. Like we might have to do some personal coaching and really digging in to see if, there are what is leading to that red, and are there ways that we can be supportive in coaching that help him beef up that area and increase the scores, because he's doing phenomenally in other areas. You wouldn't, at least my personal approach would not be to just say, see you later. I mean, he's excelling in many areas that are important to us.
Rob, Mark.
All I would say to that is, Madelyn, I totally agree. And just to think that now you can take this sort of isolated individual data, and now you're starting to see a potential pervasive issue. Right. And so it might be something where a team coaching might be, because those are the last 2 people are seeing MPS issues for sure. So it's great to be able to isolate and be able to take a look. But at the same time, if Jairus and Eric were all members of the same team, you could be seeing a pervasive issue. You might be seeing an issue with the manager. So, right. So, but for sure, this is another example of letting the data, don't overreact to the data. Right, Mark?
Yeah, exactly. I think what's interesting about this next generation is they all want a mentor. And I've noticed like really fast growing companies have a really strong mentor program about how to get you to the next level, not just from a manager, but people inside the organization. And so I do feel like this is an opportunity to find out, why are you excelling in so many areas and what's going on with this NPS score. So I find the companies that keep people longer have somebody that is mentoring them to be a better person, be a better individual at work, outside of work, with their families. And so I think this, when I look at this, there's got to be some sort of mentor program can be able to help boost those scores pretty quickly, and to kind of help those younger people in general, because sometimes a younger person doesn't want to tell their manager what they're really struggling with because that's their boss, that's the person that can fire them. But somebody outside would be more than happy. Like in our industry, there's a lot of user groups, which, I might talk to a technician on the other side of the country because I feel a little bit more comfortable, and they're sharing their secrets because they know you're not a competitor. So I do feel like that is going to help out our industry a lot. If you don't have mentors, if you don't have user groups, you're definitely missing out.
So I want to throw a scenario in here because we get a chance to look at so many different companies and sort of the tenures of the employees in those different roles, right? I mean, if I told you this person has been in the role for 6 weeks, that tells you one story as opposed to someone who's been in that role for 6 years, right? 2 different types of stories. So the context. So let's assume that Jairus had been in this company for 6 years, right? I would suspect, based on kind of your assessment, Madelyn, that this person is an organized operator, right? Gets their job done, kind of knows what they need to do, and the drop in that NPS score, maybe over some period of time, might start, and maybe even that employee experience together, those things might make me start to feel this person feels like they've hit a ceiling. They feel like, all right, their company's not investing in me. Their skills assessment is a little below average here, right? Maybe this person is starting to scratch the head a little bit and saying, I wonder, right? They may not have put their resume out, but it might be an indicator, kind of being able to read the tea leaves here, saying, this person is kind of starting to just quiet quitting is a word that's out there a lot these days, right? Maybe that quiet quitting is in their direction. How do you all react or respond to that thought with regard to Jairus?
Yeah, I think that tenure is huge. And it kind of goes along with my thought process of, well, hopefully I know more about them than just this before we sit down and have a conversation. But I think that's huge. If you're If you've been there a long time, you're not nobody's investing in you. You feel like you're stuck. Maybe you've been passed up for some promotions. You're going to go do your job. You're going to do it well because you know how to do it, but you're not out there going to bring in more business, because how does it benefit you? It doesn't. It hasn't for years. And that could be a conversation that's never had. You never see it. And something like this could prompt that conversation. It could uncover that he really has interest in management and other opportunities. And with his long tenure, he could be a great supervisor. But again, you could miss all that, quiet quitting or real quitting could be in the future.
Mark, Rob?
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, with quiet quitting is just another extension of what's been going on for years now. So I think fortunately now that people are aware of it and aware that people don't just want to clock in and clock out, they want more from their employer, become a better person. Sometimes it's about the money, but most of the time, in my experiences, it's not. It's more about, do I appreciate my leadership? Does my manager appreciate me? It could be something as simple as, you know what, I am blowing it out of the water here, and no one's telling me I'm doing a good job. So it could be something very simple like that. Is all you have to do is text them and call them and say, man, I'm just so proud of you. You're amazing. And then all of a sudden, everything else improves. So it's kind of funny. I think it does come down to just that personal touch again.
So Vinay, you and I actually went through something very similar to this. So Vinay, we're working together on getting a priority alignment for a few companies. And we actually saw something like this and Vinay, I'm so glad you brought that up, because the lens that you view a report like this, as far as, that perspective of the tenure is extremely important. And we had a case where we actually saw a new employee was highly aligned with their manager, but that some of the more experienced technicians that were reporting to that manager were not anywhere nearly highly as aligned. And so a couple things came out of that. One is, we know that that manager is probably spending a lot more time with that new technician, number one. Number two, we learned that in some cases it was an erosion of those priorities, are just maybe not quiet quitting, but just a natural erosion of being left out to their own devices, but ultimately it goes back again to reports like this will give you the idea to create those intentional activities, to always be having the pulse on what's happening within your team, for sure.
Yeah. I was looking through the comments just to make sure. I've been trying to tie a thread through all the comments that have been coming through. And I think one that I missed over, J.R. Jones, I'm having a hard time speaking today, asked a question a little earlier. It says, when assigning more responsibilities, how can a culture of value be developed? And just again asked, culture, made a statement of culture of value. I'd like to hear sort of from the panel here, being able to see, and we've seen three different people here and maybe kind of three different sort of scenarios. How do you build that culture of value using this? Is there a framework here? Is there kind of a jumping off point to do that? Be intentional in getting that productivity and intention, but being able to get your people to opt in. Does that make sense?
I like that. That something just came to mind as you said it, was the tech referrals, because that is a value to say, I'm presenting our name, our brand to people, and they're really happy. So our value is, customer service. And so when you push that, and when you reward that, and when you bring it up to the team about how great you're doing here, it makes other people say, well, I want that recognition. I want that reward. Sometimes the reward financially doesn't matter. It's more because what people want, especially new hires, they want a mentor in their life, and they want to make their mentor proud. So when you say, I'm proud of you, it's kind of like their mother or their father saying, I'm proud of you. It's a big deal. And so I love that. And it's all built around, whatever you're measuring should be built around your culture, not just how much money are you making. It should be, what do I value this company to be?
Madelyn, looks like you got some thoughts brewing.
Yeah, no, I completely, I love what Mark said. the culture of value, the first thing that came to mind for me was this idea of we really see, we define core values and brand values. And we see that those are important, that there's the value you promise you'll deliver to your market. But the one that we miss sometimes is the value, our core values that we promise to each other in our organization. And it even comes back to what we were looking at before, what we talked about before, that no amount of money or benefits is going to replace for an employee a level of engagement, a level of investment, a level of really caring about their success. You can't necessarily change. There are structures in place. There are realities in place that you have to cope with. But within that structure, you can take an individualized approach to your team that will make sure that what they feel is valued, not just for their contribution. Because if they feel valued as a person, what you said at the beginning, Vinay, is that you can pay them for their minds, but if you have their hearts, that's a different story.
Yeah, that's right.
And Madelyn, you're lucky you jumped in there, because I was trying to jump in myself, and because you went completely where I was going to go.
Okay.
So yeah, I think when you say something like culture of value, and I'll put that in quotes, right? I think the first place to start is, as we talk about companies of all different sizes, I'm always really shocked by when I talk to how many companies who don't actually come out and have identified what their core values are. So until they define what those core values are, and not only do you have core values, is it the consistent delivery of those? It's really those four things you want to do with core values, which is review, hire, fire, and reward around your core values. And if you're consistently doing that, having a culture of value is pretty easy to do. I can tell you, I work with a number of companies that do that. In fact, internally at our company, we actually recognize core values every week and reward every week. And so that's something that can be done. And we're talking about $20 gift cards here, people. We're not talking about huge investments, but just recognition by adherence to core values is something that can be done instantaneously. And so a lot of times when I'm talking to clients, they tell us oh yeah, we have core values. And then I ask, how do you use them on a daily basis? The answer is usually one that they really can't construct. So by making sure that you have that, consistent delivery and adherence to your core values, you can build a value of culture. I don't want to step on you, Madelyn. I know you're the culture person. I'm not, but that was the first thing in my mind. You said it.
Well, I will tell you, Rob, to that point, using some of the data from these graphs, I don't have it here, but we've actually helped companies take those KPIs and associate KPIs that are directly related to their core values, right? So they can see not a graph like this, but these 7 things are what we believe for that role are specific measures, outcomes of that core value.
Yeah.
That's a scorecard that we send to people on a weekly basis, right?
They should tie directly to their priority, right?
That's right. Paper for performance is the conversation that's now being had with those employees, because they know how to succeed, how to do well, where they need coaching, where they need support against in alignment with the core values. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. We've been looking at the screen for a long time. And as we're coming kind of towards a close here, I want to make sure that anybody who saw those graphs and would like to see something like that for their organization, just type in behavior into the comments, and I'll get you in touch with my team so you can get at one of those graphs and you can see how your organization, how each one of your individual people actually show up on graphs like that, so you can have that individualized attention and support to them. But I'd like to go around to the panel here. Give me and Rob, you said I'm putting you on the spot by asking you for nuggets. I've gotten like 15 quotes from you throughout the course of this already, so I feel like you've already given me plenty.
Good.
Takeaways. If someone's going to walk away from this conversation, listening in, Madelyn, what would you give as something they can do to have a conversation with people, to find out what they want to do, where they want to give more to the organization?
Yeah, one phrase that sticks out to me that I use is this idea of expect, support, and reward. I think one of the small things that I hadn't even really articulated that this graph does is it makes it really clear what you're expecting people to perform on, right? Those expectations are clear. And I can't tell you how many people are sitting in their jobs today and they actually don't know what they need to do to be successful. So I think that's really the first step. And then having data like this, how do you, when you see that this is red or it's yellow, Rob's favorite color, and an opportunity, how do you support them in getting to that point? And what is the reward? Because I think that other reality is if you have somebody that is outperforming, they've got green everywhere, it's not a guarantee that their chart is going to continue to look like that. That there has to be something built in to have that reward. So, how do you have these conversations? I think that, and I might be too nuanced. I think of the employees that I lead and the employees I have led and the organizations that I've worked with. And I can't say that any conversation is the same. But I think if you go in with clear expectations, you have data that can help give you some insights as to where there are opportunities, you're going to be better off in leading that conversation.
Mark, Rob, I'm gonna give you 30 seconds each, just because we're kind of getting close to the end here. Mark, I'll start with you. Give me 30 seconds. Give me a drop some wisdom here that makes it worthwhile.
I think what we've talked about this before, but I think what this does best is most managers, leaders, they have 1,000 things they got to do. And sometimes taking that individual time for your employees. What I've noticed is I see a lot of people focusing in on the top tier people and the bottom tier. And I think what this comes in when you have a little bit nuance, a better reporting, is you can focus in the people in the middle are the people you probably can affect more than the people in the very bottom, very top. The very top, they're going to be top performers regardless how much time you spend with them. They're still going to be top performers, but the bottom people are sometimes 1 foot out the door. So if you can focus a little bit more time with the middle, it seems to have a lot more success overall in the company is what I've heard from clients that work with you in the past.
Go swimming in the yellow is what I'm hearing. Rob?
Everybody's jumping on my yellow. And so unfortunately, I'm not going to give you a new nugget. I'm going to sort of piggyback on Madelyn here because having leveraged this exact survey and also a similar survey, what we call, an employee experience survey, the scores that always surprised me the most, weren't the NPS scores. It was, do I know what is expected of me at work? And I was shocked by how many negative responses we got to that question. So create clear expectation, and if you have defined core values, look for an adherence to core values, and look to review and reward off of core values.
So Carl chimed in the last second here. Says, I've heard the word leaders used a lot today. Parting words. Are you a leader or just the person in charge? Who says? I'm gonna make a statement. I want to kind of maybe see a thumbs up, thumbs down from the three of you. I think leadership is an internal concept, right? It is an intrinsic capability. You run from a place of, hey, I'm leading the charge. I'm going up this hill. You guys want to come with me? You guys, gals, want to come with me? Yeah, Carl. I think the answer to that question is you're a leader because you believe it, and you enlist others and enroll others to come fight that fight with you. Carl, Brian, JR, Ryan, Catherine, Jury, and I think I may have left out a couple others. Thank you so much for flavoring this conversation. I think it made it a really, really nice conversation. But my panel, Mark, Rob, Madelyn, thank you for the time. I really do appreciate it. I feel like there's lots of really good nuggets in here.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us, Guy. It's great.